All right, what is up, and welcome back to Talk Nutrition. I am your host, Johan Festers, Odyssey Coaching Systems, and we are back with another episode. Today, we're going to get a little bit more nerdy than usual. Now, obviously, we always will dive into fat loss, fitness goals, self-development, mindset, and all the things related to getting you resilient, strong, healthy, living longer. But look, we got to look further than workouts and meal plans, and even the mindset work. I've been getting a lot more into gut health, and I wanted to explain why I started talking about this now on my social media channels and also here on the podcast. Look, we've done a few gut health related episodes in the past with guests, but as I'm personally looking into this further, I want to share with you what I'm learning so that I can, put forward the knowledge that I now have, but also understanding that, look, and I just talked about this in my stories today. I'm recording this on February 26th, so it's probably going to be not online anymore, like by the time this airs, but look, you might have those outside kind of goals, right? Fat loss, muscle gain, you want to look better. That's cool and that's great. And for a lot of people, that's usually where it starts. But we got to understand that the inside needs to be taken care of for the outside to show. You got to be healthy. You got to have a good, resilient digestive system in order to live long, be strong, but even absorb and break down those foods that you consume. Let's use muscle gain as an example. You might be eating, force feeding almost, right? But if you have, for example, low stomach acid, which is key for protein breakdown because it actually activates certain enzymes that help break down proteins. If that's not happening as well, and if you are eating a ton of protein, but you're not fully breaking it down, you're not fully absorbing that protein, you're still not going to get as much as you might think. Now, mind you, there's also micronutrient deficiencies that also come from things like low stomach acid, right? That will cause health issues. Your low iron and those kind of things. If there's one thing I've really seen among clients is that when they have low iron, it usually is not, I'm saying usually, it's usually not intake issue. It's a absorption issue. They might be eating it, but there's something going on in the digestive system that leads to iron not being fully absorbed, and stomach acid can be a big factor there. This is also very much related to stress, chronic stress, and other lifestyle factors, which we will get into today. But I want you to understand, look, why do we now shift a little bit towards more like the gut health, and soon we're also going to dive into women's health and then hormones more, right? Because I want to expand our horizon. I want to give you more knowledge so that you understand your health better. And so that if you're listening and you're like, well, I'm always bloated, I'm always belching, I have acid reflux, you will start to understand these kind of concepts. And now you can be an advocate for your own health. You can start to look into these topics with me, and then we can all get healthy, live longer, and of course, look for help if we need it. Because look, excuse me, bit of a disclaimer, I guess, which just needs to be said. Anything I'll discuss here is for educational purposes only. And this is not to replace any medical advice or what you do or the things that you should discuss with your doctor. And this isn't even just about me and my podcast here. This is just for you in general to understand. If you go online, I mean, first of all, don't go off like fucking Dr. Google or a ChatGPT for your health advice, because you might be taking the wrong steps. And I do actually believe I saw a news article that someone died because of something they did, which was recommended by ChatGPT. So it can be pretty serious. Now, luckily, that's usually not the case, but still, don't do dumb shit. I'll put it that way. The gut health space is almost like that fat loss space on steroids, to where in fat loss, you'll see all the fat burners and all the claims and all. Look, gut health by itself is already way more complicated and complex. And there's also a lot more marketing in terms of bloating and, probiotics and all these kind of things. And these can be fine in certain cases, but also don't just jump on something. Don't just listen to a podcast or read a post or see a reel, or especially on TikTok. It's full of crap there, by the way. Don't go on it. But don't look at these content pieces and see it as, hey, this is now what I need to do right away. You are still in charge. You're in control. You're responsible for doing your own research and, of course, running things by your doctor, especially if it's more health related, especially if you have certain conditions. I got a new client now, and she was doing a Hashimoto's challenge online. And I'm like, look, certain concepts may be okay and potentially beneficial, like, low FODMAP eating, anti-inflammatory diets, those kind of things. But look, when it comes down to more complex cases, we got to understand, look, we should do this with guidance, okay? But I'm going to teach you about low stomach acid today. how it actually can cause heartburn, because a lot of times you might think it is from too much stomach acid, right? Let's dive in, okay? This is part 1 of a 4-part mini-series on gut health, which breaks down every section in my brand new gut repair blueprint, a new free guide for you that you can get. No strings attached. All you got to do is go to my Instagram right now, DM me the word gut, and I'm going to send that over for you, okay? And of course, understand that I didn't just want to send you the guide. You will get a few questions, which allows you to kind of recap your current symptoms and then understand with that where to look in the guide and potentially see some benefits there, right? And I want you to focus on the lifestyle and nutrition way more than anything else, including supplementations, okay? So if you ever feel bloated after heavy meals, or even just bloated in general, you wake up bloated, right? Or maybe you've had heartburn yourself and you might have gone to the doctor and you might even be on acid blocking medications. It could be from too low stomach acid, right? So a lot of times it almost makes sense to think, hey, stomach acid is ending up in the esophagus. It's coming back up to where that's not where it's supposed to go, right? Creating that heartburn kind of feeling, right? It makes sense to think, hey, acid reflux, this has to be from too much. I'm not saying that it is not, but oftentimes it is because of lower stomach acid, okay? PPIs, for example, are among the most prescribed drugs. But if you do have low stomach acid, why are we then suppressing stomach acid even further instead of asking why, first of all, of why is stomach acid low, right? So I want to flip the script there. And I also want to start thinking of, okay, why is it low? Can we do something about it? Okay, which is going to be way more basic than you might expect, right? So I want you to understand what stomach acid actually does and is. So what's low stomach acid or hydrochloric acid? Okay, it's produced by the parietal cells in the stomach lining, and production requires things like zinc, B vitamins, chloride, and also proper vagus nerve signaling. This has to do with your nervous system. You want to be in rest and digest, right? It's literally called rest and digest. It's the opposite of fight or flight. You want to understand the balance between these two. And sure, sometimes it makes sense to be in fight or flight, especially during intense workout. But for digestion, for healing, for the body to just do what it's supposed to do, your organs are working, right? You want to be in rest and digest. So the proper vagus nerve signaling is very, very key. Even if you do take your B vitamins and your zincs, or you get it through your diet, that is still going to be a very key factor. And in my clients, a big factor I see when it comes to lower stomach acid tends to be stress, okay? To where even without really trying to support stomach acid, we just fix stress and all of a sudden heartburn can go away, okay? So what are the core functions of stomach acid in general? Now, protein breakdown is a big one, okay? So it activates pepsin to break down protein into amino acid. And now you start to understand, hey, this is actually very important because low acid could cause incomplete digestion, which can, by the way, start to ferment that food in the stomach, right? Which is how that heartburn can show up. Because the gas and everything bubbles up almost, right? And then you get that splash up into the esophagus, and that's that heartburn, right? That acid reflux, the heartburn feeling. And you might just feel heavy, okay? So it starts there in the stomach. With that stomach acid, your protein begins to break down. Just how through chewing, right, through your saliva, you already excrete the enzymes important for breaking down carbohydrates. You see, that's why I want you to also chew your food properly, okay? Stomach acid is also important for nutrient absorption. Iron, zinc, magnesium, calcium, B12. You see, we talked about iron. Oftentimes, it's not an intake issue, it's an absorption issue. Oftentimes, it may have to do with lower stomach acid, right? And chronic deficiencies can often be traced back to the lower stomach acid in these key nutrients, right? Once again, iron, B12, zinc, magnesium, calcium, right? Now, stomach acid is also a defense mechanism because it sterilizes food. And now you also start to understand to where, hey, if certain bacteria survive because of low stomach acid, the risk for potential dysbiosis or SIBO, right, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, becomes higher, okay? And of course, stomach acid, as I said, almost like that's first, it's not the first step, right? It's actually chewing, but okay. One of the first steps, let's say, of the digestive cascade, it signals the pancreas to release enzymes. It signals the gallbladder to release bile, which is very important for breaking down fats. So you now start to see, hey, this stomach acid is actually very, very important for that downstream, optimal function of your digestive system. So how can you tell that you might have low stomach acid? I think if you really feel bloated 30 to 60 minutes after a meal, that's usually pretty, decent sign of, hey, like it might be low. So once again, bloating 30 to 60 minutes after meals, excess burping, just feeling very heavy after protein meals specifically, because remember that stomach acid is key for breaking down protein. Undigested food in the stool, iron deficiencies, hair thinning, brittle nails. This is a very common symptom for my female clients, and they will often take, hair and nail vitamins for this. Well, let's start to think of what is in those vitamins. Okay, so it likely includes some of those key nutrients I just mentioned. But we're doing the same thing as what the medical field does with symptoms. You just get a pill to take without addressing the root cause. Okay. Chronic fatigue is a big one too. And of course, the heartburn that we discussed. So why is it that heartburn doesn't automatically mean too much stomach acid? Low stomach acid, like I said before, can cause that poor breakdown of food, which then sits and ferments in the stomach, which causes gas to build up. There's more pressure in the stomach. And then that acid can be pushed up into the esophagus. And also, by the way, so stomach acid isn't even supposed to be able to go back up, right? So you have what's called the esophageal sphincter, LES, right? But due to poor digestion and pressure, that might actually end up being open versus closed. It's supposed to close, right? So it's not necessarily that there's a flood of stomach acid. It might just be that the drain isn't fully working. Make sense? Common causes include stress. Once again, like stress is such a big one. Chronic stress is huge because it shifts the body into more that sympathetic mode instead of parasympathetic. Digestion requires rest and digest. I mean, it's obvious, right? It's in the name. Cortisol also suppresses stomach acid production, so that vagal nerve tone or vagus nerve tone, right, or vagal tone is very key. So a lot of times what I will really heavily focus on with my clients, really in general, but especially if there are some digestive issues, we want to manage the stress. And I will even put it this way, because I've had clients come to me too, who had done testing before, they worked with multiple naturopaths, they've done protocols, they've done GI maps, their symptoms always came back. Why? Well, within the first 2 weeks, I could tell they were stressed out of their minds. Now, that is the thing that's holding them back from healing, okay? With the medications, I don't necessarily want to spend too much time on this. I just want you to understand that if stomach acid is low and you now take a medication that lowers that even further, suppresses that even further, instead of helping, we may actually be causing some, overgrowth of certain bacteria that you don't want to have too many of, and just making digestion worse while we are trying to fix a symptom with a medication that does the opposite. Now, I also want to really focus on diet here, because even just simple eating habits like properly chewing your food, which many people will not do consistently, which is one of my weaknesses, right, can be such a big factor here, right? You want to properly chew your food with 20 to 30 chews per bite, really making sure that we really break down the food that we consume so it's easier to digest, okay? Now, ultra-processed food diets, high in sugars, a lot more inflammatory-based diets, basically. Low mineral intakes, eating too fast, I just mentioned already. I think drinking a lot of water or just liquids in general with your meals is also a big one. Eating too late before bedtime, right? Kind of like having not enough time between your last meal and bedtime to fully start breaking down, that food and starting the digestive process. I think diet is such a key one. You're not getting enough of the diversity you need, the different fibers, the different micronutrients. You need all this stuff, right? And a whole food based diet by nature is more anti-inflammatory. So I want to make sure that we cover nutrients, right? We cover whole foods. We cover stress. We eat slowly. We are present with that meal. We are in rest and digest. We're not stressed while eating or distracted, right? We're not chugging liters and liters of water with our meals. Now, have a drink. It's fine, but don't overdo it, because that could dilute stomach acid even further if it is too much, okay? It's probably not as big of a deal as some people make it online, but still keep it in mind, okay? If we're really chugging and chugging, might not be the best for stomach acid. Now, eating late at night and just overall a whole food based diet, not your standard American diet where it's mostly processed foods, okay? Now, I want to restate why it may be a problem to suppress stomach acid even further with those medications. We covered this already, but I want to restate this because this is where a lot of issues may start. Lower stomach acid can lead to bacterial overgrowth. That overgrowth can lead to inflammation. Again, weaker acid production, and now we are stuck in a vicious cycle. So as we get into leaky gut, gut dysbiosis, etc., in other episodes, you'll start to see, hey, these all play hand in hand, right? So that low stomach acid might be one of the reasons why certain bacteria begin to overgrow, okay? So we got to understand this downstream like domino effect, okay? So low stomach acid, poor protein digestion, amino acid deficiency, poor detox capacities, right? Amino acids, by the way, is not just for building muscle, right? If we have poor detox, we have poor hormonal balance, weaker immune function. I mean, we talked about certain minerals, but low stomach acid leads to poor mineral absorption. That mineral absorption could lead potentially to thyroid dysfunction. Now we deal with fatigue. Things like H. pylori can overgrowth, candida, SIBO. So we really just want to understand, look, there's so many reasons to at least make sure we get enough or we produce enough stomach acid, okay? So I really want to cover those foundations. And before trying to support with anything, and even like an apple cider vinegar, which I personally take, it could potentially help if it's low. But also here, right, do this with guidance. If you have ulcers or gastritis, you don't want to take that, right? Same for beta and HCl supplements. So again, the foundations, chewing your food properly, 20 to 30 chews per bite. One that I didn't mention yet is proper sleep, right? We want to eat when it's daytime, right? Not too close to bed, but also just making sure that we are sleeping 7 to 8 hours a night consistently, meaning same bedtime, same wake time every day of the week, including weekends. Nervous system regulation. Now, if you are more stressed currently, or you are generally kind of like a go, go, go type of person, what you could do before meals, some slow breathing. 5 deep belly breaths before eating could already help. And like slow exhales, okay? There's many breath work strategies that can activate that vagus nerve. There's a good one online by Andrew Huberman. I think it's called the physiological sigh. Yeah, that's what it was. Physiological sigh. That's a really good one to look into. He has a great short video on YouTube about that. I've seen some articles on that too. Again, it's something that within minutes you can use to directly support that vagus nerve, right? Creating that more like rest and digest kind of response. Because you want to be in that when you're eating, okay? Another one, stop grazing. Because if I see a lot of people come in, especially if they have fat loss goals, they're trying to have all these little snacks and hey, we have some carrots here, we have this here and a protein bar. No, your migrating motor complex, which is your GI tract cleaning crew, okay? So think about this as your room service at a hotel. If you are still in a room service is not going to come in to clean. They're not going to clean the bathroom. They're not going to clean the beddings. They're going to wait for you to be away. Then they will go in and clean. That is your migrating motor complex for the gut. You need breaks in between meals. So I don't want you to be grazing all across the day. We're constantly, right? We're always leaving food in the digestive tract. No, you need breaks in between so that your body can sweep, right? Very important. So no grazing. We touch on, drinking large large fluids with your meals. I think also there, just keep in mind, have a drink. It's totally fine, just not too much. And I do think that if we do consume a very inflammatory diet where we're talking ultra processed foods, we're talking a lot of added sugars and potentially certain seed oils and just highly processed foods in general, I think we got to dial that back or potentially even remove certain ones and just prioritizing, good proteins, good fibers, good whole foods, and living the lifestyle that we should be doing anyway, also for our fat loss goals and muscle and everything else in between. And mind you, we're talking micronutrients here too, which is key for your mental health, okay? So literally we're talking gut health affects everything in the body in so many ways. It is what allows you to take the good stuff from the food that you're eating and actually do something with it, okay? All your organs require certain, amino acids and enzymes and vitamins and minerals so that you can just live healthy. That's why we dive into this more now. Let's actually touch on the apple cider vinegar, because that's something I briefly brought up. And I personally do this. So I'll do like just about a tablespoon before my first meal fasted. I will flush it down with water. And then I'll do that before dinner usually as well. This can help like temporarily acidify the stomach. But once again, should we just jump on this because we listen to a podcast, or should we be smart about this? If you take it and you feel that burning feeling worsen, I would pull it away. Don't use it. If you have severe gastritis or active ulcers, like, again, don't take this stuff. Okay, same goes for beta and HCl. Generally speaking, though, it could be one way to kind of support that. May also help with things like blood sugar regulation, but again, be smart about this stuff. As for other supplementations, I mean, you could look into like pancreatic enzymes, digestive bitters, beta and HCl. There is one that I really like by Now Foods, which is called Super Enzymes, that has enzymes as well as ox bile and some beta and HCl. But once again, it's case dependent. It's not something that I say everyone should take this, okay? Under guidance, especially if you're on like gut medications. Like, don't think, hey, I hear this supplement, I'm now going to start drinking apple cider vinegar to support my stomach acid, or I'm going to, get this supplement because I see an ad on Instagram or something. Okay. Again, look for the symptoms, because you might listen to this and really not notice anything. Okay, great. But if you do notice like bloating after protein, you do see some things like B12 and iron deficiencies. You do have those reflux, symptoms, or potentially some SIBO or other overgrowth kind of things. Start looking at what can I do to support my digestion, which could be as simple as slow breathing before a meal, properly chewing your food, maybe even going for a quick walk after a meal. That's also a very nice way to kind of stay back in parasympathetic, okay? Now there's something called the baking soda test, which you could try, look into. I'm not going to explain that in detail here on the podcast, but look that up. Baking soda test is an at-home test you could potentially do to see if you may have lower stomach acid. But once again, I do want you to be smart about this stuff. If you really notice a lot of pain, you notice, undigested food in your stools, you have maybe even black stool or mucus, even blood, right? If there's a lot of inflammation, I have a client currently with IBD. So that's a common symptom for him. Actually, not as much anymore, but in the past it used to be. Look for help here, right? I do think a GI map is going to be great if we are truly dealing with a lot of digestive symptoms. I just don't think people should start there, because there's some great testing out there. And to be honest with you, like, a GI map is a really cool thing to do, really cool to understand your gut microbiome, what's living in your gut. Hey, do we have any pathogens or parasites or viruses? And is there some dysbiosis going on? How's the gut lining doing? Is there inflammation? How's my immune system doing? These are all things that you can learn from a GI map. But should you start there? No. If you fix the lifestyle, you choose slower, space your meals. I would say track your food. It's probably a good thing as well for the beginning, just so you can create the structure, right? And then while you track, you look at bloating, energy, bowel movements. How often are you going during the day, right? It should be at least once a day. If you are not pooping every single day, that is a red flag, and you got to start looking into this stuff. That is how you excrete things like toxins and excess hormones. And if that stays in the gut, right? For example, estrogen can be reabsorbed through the gut lining, which could cause down the road some imbalances, okay? So I wanted to wrap it up with that one. Got to know that this was pretty info heavy, but it's just fun to also just nerd out a little bit more, right? Sharing with you what I'm diving into, sharing with you things that I see with my clients. Like I said, I put together a guide for you to download for free. All you got to do is DM me the word gut on Instagram, which covers low stomach acid, leaky gut, gut dysbiosis, and then sluggish liver and bile function. Very cool to start looking into your symptoms and fully understanding, potentially taking some steps to start improving your symptoms. And of course, if you do need more help with this, I would say, first of all, start with a guide. DM me the word gut on Instagram to get my gut repair blueprint. Go through that, right? Let's go through those symptoms. You're going to get a few questions from me to really start to address, hey, how's my gut really doing? How's my digestion? And then if you do notice, hey, I've been taking these steps, I'm chewing my food properly, doing all the things we just discussed in the podcast, it's going to make sense to reach out for help, whether it's me or someone else. But just make sure that just how it is with fat loss, there's a lot of misinformation going around. There's a lot of misconceptions. And I think specifically for gut health, we just need to be smart about it. Okay? I'll talk to you in the next episode.